Welcome to the Heart of Soul podcast, an exploration of who you are, what you are, and why you are, offering new ways to investigate age-old questions at the heart of you. Hi, it's Joseph, and thanks for listening to the Heart of Soul podcast. Today, incarnational imperatives in service. Yes, there's a new truth in service born every minute. By request, definitions of duality, preduality, and unality, and a couple of new revisions to some old Edenity prayers. We'll do more in Sainthood in the following episode, but this is a beginning to follow the thread we began last time. And of course, because you just can't get enough of it, another installment of Guess the Guru that surprised the hell out of Stace. So stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for listening. Greetings and welcome, people and things and stuff, and the phrase I usually say, and my name and his name, and we're here.
All right, he went meta to describe the content without describing the content.
Yes.
Wow, that was good.
You know the stuff, you know. So we have a number of things to make mouth movements and sounds about today, and possibly gestures for those of you watching us on YouTube. I want to start with a small thing. I wonder if this has ever occurred to you before. A lovely client of mine today pointed out that the word lie is in the center of the word belief. Did you ever notice that?
Oh, no. That is cool.
Isn't that cool?
Wow, that is way cool. Yeah, wonderful. No, I never noted that. So
I think that's a keeper for future.
That's a keeper. Okay, we're so stealing that, but we will acknowledge that we didn't think of it. So
yes,
that's fine.
And yes. I don't have permission. I didn't get permission to mention him by name, but to the wonderfully astute Russian couple in New York that I work with. Thank you both for that observation.
Super.
We are going to, at the end of this episode, play another rigorous game of Guess the Guru. And we had, there's a poem I wanted to share that came out of me also, and I've already forgotten. There was one other thing, right?
Excuse me.
Oh, we're going to talk about the LA fires. But I thought my sense is this poem will be a good place to set some kind of context in some ways, because we're going to be, our main topic du jour is following the last episode and going deeper into Edenity's practical take on sainthood, for lack of a better term. So I wanted to share this poem, and I don't really know why, but what I do know is I was excited to share it, and then I was afraid to, and then didn't want to anymore, and then I knew that I should.
Now, Joseph, right there, just had a fabulous summary of what happens when you have existential level curiosity in your proactive arc of trying to become your soul eye bigger than your protector eye.
Yeah,
so
right.
That was
it
right there.
It was thank you. Yeah, I wouldn't have framed it exactly like that, but that's also what's been sort of going on. So this was a peak kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It was a moment of deep and profound sense of authenticity and divinity that happened while I was doing dishes, and I've been sort of going back and forth. So I was doing dishes and this came to me. This morning started out so tired, then overcome with the joy of emptiness, a freedom that was beyond all content, followed by another wave of exhaustion and the clear direction to rest after weeks of compulsion to persist. And I am finally allowed to stop, the mandate of divinity or my own soul, for it's often hard to tell the difference. Let the booster rocket of aliveness extinguish, at least for a while, having perhaps sufficiently propelled me to wherever I am now. After a deep daytime sleep, I woke to sadness, aloneness, not really with any content, sorrow perhaps, and I saw the part of me that wanted the joy back, and then I saw right through. This is insanity, this part thinks, these wild, unpredictable swings. How can we function this way? He fears this will get what he thinks of as worse, and he knows he cannot undo what has been done, because I have undone my way to this already. You can only undo what has been done, not undone, I hear a voice say. And the soul me smiles the smile it smiles when a thought, intuition, and the wisdom of divinity align in the same moment of space. This part of me thinks we're headed for madness, but in a moment I see this is the only real sanity. This is what the strategic world strives to approximate on its terms, what it wants so desperately but won't vulnerably admit. To be alive but inside a box of control as if to have an on and off switch. To feel deeply but only the emotions that feel superficially good, as if we were authorities on good and bad and know what we need to feel. To be porous to reality but somehow not a part of it, to stay some safe distance, whatever that means. It's all just so damn tight and static. The control, transcendence, and altruism all make so much sense now from this place. I know what you're looking for, human beings. You can't help but seek it, even if you say you don't. It's not up to you. What you think is the insanity you avoid, the instability, the unpredictability, the chaos. It is what you are, and so the destiny to return to. When your fear is no longer bigger than your soul, to risk all you think you are to become all that you've always been. It seems crazy, I know, but that's the secret. That's the most essential trick our protection has, to normalize the actual madness and justify the grip thereto. But truth need never be gripped, maintained, controlled, cultivated, practiced, regulated, or otherwise managed. It's not on our terms, and it's to this truth we can surrender to one moment at a time and marvel at how we not only still function, but dance through life to music only we can hear. We, the few sane enough to plumb the depths of the insanity that it is to be human, until it's the heaven that everyone looks for somewhere else.
Ah, wow. I just feel like I just had a whole spa day, a day spa. And, oh, that was really lovely. You provided a warm stream of both the existential angst and its solution inherent to consciousness as it awakens, Joseph.
Thank
Wow,
you.
beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like a real-time experience these days of it being washed out, coming up and washed out, coming up and washed out. And normally these kinds of cycles can take, days, weeks, months, even years. So to see it happening, not with no resistance, but like heavily lubed. It's sort of
heavily
like
lubed.
It's like, oh, I see. This is how it works, because there's just there's no not seeing it.
And that fits beautifully in our overall topic today as uniting sainthood and humanness as one thing. Maybe we can even deconstruct that a little bit more today. So that's great.
Cool.
Wow, thank you, Joseph.
Thank you for listening and giving me the space to giving me. Can anyone give space? No. I'm so caught up on words sometimes. I'm really sensitive to falsity.
I know you are.
Especially with words, and I'd start to trip up on it. Like sometimes the broad brushes of words must suffice. But,
yes.
Thank you for giving me space. It's just
That's
my
an
mind's like, what is it,
phrase,
like in a box? Here's a box of space for you. How does that work?
Especially since it's your podcast.
I know. God damn it. I'm in the podcast and I'm also watching as the producer. Is this okay? Is that content all right? Yeah. Should I edit that out?
Yeah, well, no, just thank yourself, That's thank you. Then you're fine. So
yeah. That was like there's one of the roles in the podcast staff is the editor or a censor for metaphysical rigor. And he's like, cut. You can't say that. What? You can't say give space like that. Doesn't make any sense. Okay.
Yeah. Well, what you're illuminating here, Joseph, is really an essential, not so clear presumption of identity. And that is that when you start to experience the essential in application as the human, you start to see, another way to say it is, the more advanced you get, let's say I just switched over to another way of saying it,
Hmm.
there's no fat in what comes out of the hole in your face.
Yeah.
You caught a piece of fat there,
Yeah.
see, but the whole poem had not one
Yeah, that
gram
moment, yeah. And
of fat.
and that's the way it came out. I only edited a few words after that. And on the other
Yeah.
hand, I talked to my mother for about 15 minutes yesterday. It was all fat. It was all fat. And my
Oh,
parents are
oh,
below average consciousness, so I'm not
yeah.
saying everybody is like that or even all parents, but it was like I
Uh-huh.
wasn't triggered except for one point where she said to my father, our wayward son has called us. And I
Oh
said,
man,
yeah,
there's
and
a
it,
whole universe in
I
that
know,
word.
right? Our wayward son. And so I didn't feel like a strong reaction. So I was just
Uh-huh.
like, what do you mean? I just did the curiosity trick. I was like, what do you
Yeah.
mean wayward? Like, well, we haven't
Uh-huh.
heard from you in a while. I just said, well, the phone works both ways. Like as she was playing victim. There was
Yeah,
like
of course.
the victimhood, and then the assumption that
Uh,
I should call her. So there's this
uh,
guilt transaction trying to happen. So
yes, right.
in the past, I would, a part of me would sometimes like tear that apart and be like, "Here's what you're doing," and beat her up with truth. Instead, I
Yeah,
just did not complete the guilt transaction. It was like, "Well, what do you mean by that?"
exactly. Oh,
But
exactly.
afterwards, after we hung up, I found myself uneasy for like 3 or 4 hours, and it was I don't think I fully got what it was until you used that word fat. It was
Yeah,
just like it was as if I ate at Burger King. It was like, ooh, that did
yeah,
not sit well with me,
yeah, yeah,
and it
yeah.
it wasn't like a trigger that
Uh-huh.
needed to be done. I just had to digest some very saturated reused fat. Is what it felt like.
Well,
It,
that's a great way to put it. Yeah, and another dimension of that. Wait, thank you for giving me space. That fat
yeah.
thing is that when you get to a certain point, uh, you are so lean in your use of nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs that the least bit of stream context within which those words come out, you start having such a wonderful way of being almost so direct it hurts because you can't be that direct in normal intercourse, verbal intercourse in this world.
Yeah.
So here we are, as we've said so often, what the joyfulness that Joseph and I enjoy here is a very fat-free,
Lean.
communicative
Yeah.
bandwidth here.
That
So,
is something. Yeah, as opposed to one more thing about talking to my mother, I had to talk to her because her email account got hacked, and so I was one of the many people who reached out to her saying, "Hey, your email account got hacked. Did you know?" And so she
mhm.
wanted to know, so like, what's going on in your life? Tell me what's happening. And
Oh,
right, yeah,
mhm.
you see, you're already feeling it, right?
Uh,
I don't even
uh,
have to tell you. So I really was like, I haven't talked to my mother in a while. Like, sure, I'll do this, whatever. I've got a little time. Like, I felt very gracious and open. I didn't feel angry or anything. But when she asked me to tell me stuff, I could feel it was all about her getting something from me and wanting to like take um like some mother pride. Are you happy? So I'll be happy and I can feel good about myself. I could just feel it wasn't a true interest in me. And like, that's not new information for me, but I'm wanting to play along. And it's
yeah.
really hard to even move my mouth. I'm having such a hard time talking because
Uh,
it's not in a context of true interest or true relationality.
yeah.
And I have to select from things that she'll actually understand and can relate with. So it was sort of like, why don't you take a walk down this road with me? And it's actually a maze, is how it felt. And it's like, oh, I'm not enjoying this maze. This is hard,
Oh God. And there's you just unfolded another dimension here. Look what Joseph has just described in this conversation about the conversation, the non-conversation with his mother.
Yeah, no.
Look at this duality. There is so much so many data sets, data points that you become aware of in microseconds,
Whether you like it or not.
whether you like it or not. Yet, when you're talking with someone on your same bandwidth, the least amount of fat with the most amount of data points in any conversation that you become aware of. I counted 4 different dimensions in what Joseph just said, everyone, and what he was aware of at the same time he was talking. And that's another point I wanted to make. There's so much data that we miss if
Yeah.
we're just brain oriented and
Yeah.
not heart of soul oriented. There's so much more information, but on the interesting flip side, your communication gets cleaner and cleaner. You de-atherosclerosize your vocal expressions. There's so much atherosclerosis in human communication. Look at all those dimensions. Oh, well, tell me something about how you're doing.
Right.
Joseph
Command form.
accurately,
Tell me.
yeah, picked up that there is a motive of self-reflection on her part that she's completely out of touch with, is so used to feeding off her son's life, so she feels something inside in
Yeah.
some way. And these are all real things that happen in the real world that just go right over everyone's head.
Yeah, and here's one more of these data points that was just like head exploding, but that actually almost made the whole thing worth it. So, and I tried to gently tell her, like, well, I mean, I understand you wouldn't necessarily know this, but when your email account gets hacked, this person's been probably emailing and trying to scam every single contact in your list. So typically what you want to do is send an email to all of those people telling that you've been hacked and you're aware of that. And she literally said verbatim, with this hacking thing, I just want to put my head in the sand and go to sleep. And then she realized what she'd said. She said, well, not really, though. And it was like, oh, thank you for exactly describing the non-aliveness that I grew up with, that I've been working 20 years to undo in myself. It was just right there on a platter.
A rare moment of self-honesty that slipped out. It's just
Yeah, and then the fact that she had, like, there was not like, oh, I don't really mean that. It was like, oh, no, I don't mean to say that. It's like, no, that's exactly what you meant. I mean, for all I know, I probably sucked it out of her with my own authenticity,
Well, yeah, authenticity has no fat in it, so you will suck it towards you because nature abhors a vacuum.
Yeah, it was.
God.
It took me hours, and it took me hours, and I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna not talk to her for 2 more years now, or I mean, I think it also illuminated for me a future Joseph that has more compassion, because I did not have enough compassion to meta frame that conversation with. I was not feeling any kind of universal love for her. It was just like getting kind of vaguely slimed, and yeah.
Sure, but even when you admit it that way, you're still authentically displaying to your podcast audience
Our
the
podcast
steps
audience.
along the way. Yeah, all the steps along the way, which is extremely helpful, instead of just summarizing the endpoints that we're all moving towards. So
yeah, I like to
beautiful.
be. Yeah, so it was like I wasn't triggered.
Right.
And I didn't weaponize my truth and smack her around to get her to see how fat she was of soul. And I was proud of that. And like, that was actually a really big deal, because that's my mother and my father are the most tempting people to try to wake up. They trained me to become the teacher I am today by being such morons. That's why I chose below average level consciousness parents who make a lot of excuses, because it made me become obsessed with truth, or reactivated my obsession with truth, I should say, as soul. So I have them to thank for that. And then I hope one day to feel love and compassion for them without it, even the idea making me nauseated as it is in this very moment. So yeah, there's always more to go.
Always more. Always more. Thank you, Joseph. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's next?
Well, someone asked me a question about, in a sainthood context, about how people who are not awakened to divinity not as a belief but as a lived reality. How would you answer a question in that? Can you explain, please, why how it's possible in a divinity made of love that you are swimming with, to whatever varying degrees you're awakened that way in sainthood. All these, what seemingly are unnecessary disasters and catastrophes in people's lives. How would you say that? And the person asked me this, and my answer was that, well, it all depends on what a person loaded up as their incarnational imperatives to learn with. As we said so often in this podcast series, divine being is not, especially yin divin, which I'm calling her these days. Yin divin is not, and it was also true for yang divin too. It's not interested so much in our comfort.
Yeah.
It's interested only in helping us fulfill our incarnational destiny life, which makes sometimes things are taken away from you, including your life as a human, but not your life as a soul. And so all this loss, of course, grieve the loss at the human level. Of course, have your tears and feel all how you feel about it. But always at the end of it, and this was the punchline, so to speak, in the good way, look for the meaning of the moment. What might this moment of loss actually mean to what you dialed in this lifetime to work through? As we said so often, your incarnational imperatives, which is part of sainthood, we're still on the track here, really, is that since we've all had hundreds of lives, most of us, under at least 50 to 100 lifetimes, let's just say, all the way up to over 400, sometimes over 450, you can't, because nothing in the past had any way to be resolved in terms of the difference between your soul I and your protector I, which means your soul I was only 1/3 part of all of your hundreds of lifetimes. Nothing was resolvable in the past. There was no psychology. There was no on the grounds applicational philosophy of spirit in any way.
And not even the basic of like something as basic as the concept of projection didn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. So what we do in any one incarnation is bracket a theme out of this lifetime, that time, about 7 to 10 or 12 lifetimes. There's usually, you can find an encapsulated motif, a theme for those. Well, in one case, a person's was, this lifetime I dialed in never to put anyone else's self-authority above my own. Let's say that one. There's a good one right there. And that would mean that it's healthy for you to reject any and all gurus or teachers that come into your life who don't vibe with your own picture of things, right? But so that's great. That looks like that incarnational imperative means don't learn anything from anyone else too deeply that doesn't vibe with your own. And unfortunately, no matter what your incarnational imperative is, our protector I can use that in service of hiding from authorities, for example, that do have something, but that the protector I won't interpret as healthy just because it's not coming from themselves. So
okay, wait, this is news to me. Incarnational imperative in service.
Yes.
Wow.
Unless you do the proper work to tip the scales to the soul I rather than the protector I, even an incarnational imperative read by someone like myself, which I can do for people, will be put in service of until they realize that it's in service. So you can even do an incarnational imperative in service, which is why, unfortunately, blah, 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 we all need help from outside authorities in some way, or what authority in one domain even, not overall, to be able to fulfill the incarnational imperative, only trusting your own. You've got to still have curiosity if your protector I is taking it for its own, through its own filter.
Oh, right. Yeah, because if not just like trusting your own versus rejecting all of the others is sort of the gold
Yes,
versus green expression of that.
exactly right. Yeah. So there was just one good example of how this works. And with the fires, for example, what incarnation? I couldn't answer this person's question unless I went another level and saw for them, looked in the Akashica what their incarnational imperative was that included the possibility of such egregious loss. What's behind the curtain there? And that's where you find the meaning behind the content of your suffering. Uh, because if divine being is not interested in our comfort, because its view of itself and us is so cosmic and unitive that yes, it notes our personal suffering, it does, but there's always a meaning behind our suffering to look at the lesson, which is not news. Lots of paradigms teach this. But when you take it down to the emotive bones, skeleton,
Yeah.
you get a whole other set of data sets that you don't have in another paradigm that isn't based on emotivity as our prime domain of consciousness.
Do you have another example of an incarnational imperative in service?
Let's see. Yeah, I am. Let's say you've been really. I always forget this word. Um, Someone who is completely addicted to sex as sex only,
A
and just has
hedonist?
hundreds of lovers. Hedonist. Yes, thank you. Should be hedonist now because there's a lot of hedonists in feminism these days justifying men's hedonism. Yeah. At any rate, yeah. So here's one. Let's go to the opposite. It'll be a little more juicy. I've been egregiously hedonistic in past life. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to be much more choosy and find out what ahead of time, do whatever help I need to do to why I draw. I don't want to draw hedonism only. I want to draw something more meaningful to my heart and soul. Okay, so but none of it. Let's say I'm a psychic, and I am, and I read this out for someone, and they would say, "Oh, well, I followed this to the T," and I would say, "Yeah, really? How?" Well, I've rejected every sexual impulse I had first.
Yeah.
So I said, "Are you celibate then?" Well, with everyone except myself. And I
Mm.
said, "Oh, well." Can you see that that's a protector's eye filter isolating you in a bubble of non-relationality?
Hmm.
But I haven't met anyone my heart wants to open up to. Uh, why do you think that is? If you're taking care of yourself only, you've
Mm.
got to let someone in first before you can make the adjudication of whether or not it's a heartful or a soulful possible connect before you use your body. So
Mm.
there's another easy example that way, and you can work at the other side too. Well, I've been celibate. I've taken the whole thing of 10 or 12 lifetimes where I was a celibate spiritual seeker in monasteries and ashrams and stuff. And I want to this lifetime really just give myself permission to have sex when I want to have sex.
I'm glad I
And then
asked because what I'm receiving here is like on a deeper level without a deconstructive psycho spiritual process like EBE. I don't know any others like EBE, but
yeah.
maybe there are, who
Mhm.
knows. Without that, then these are the existential level truths in service, these incarnational imperatives in service that really form the shape of people's lives like for decades at a time.
Entirely decades at a time, yes.
And
And they're operating in a gray zone where they can feel they're in accordance in one way with their incarnational imperative,
yeah,
but they're not.
and
You
this is the
see?
problem when people are like, this feels like my path and this feels
Yeah,
empowering. It's like, yeah,
yes.
well, to who? Because if you
Yeah, right.
insert the 70/30 green gold thing for the strategic self running your life, then
Yeah.
things that you dead end in might need decades to dead end, you might be able to get through in weeks or months.
Yes, weeks
And
or months, right. With this peek behind the curtain, because you will have a sensibility. I love your way you put that, Joseph. There's a sensibility, a soul deep sensibility that you're on track.
yeah,
But the content of what's expressing that on trackness may be completely hijacked by your protector eye. So
Yeah. I was just
this is what
thinking
we get.
yesterday about it with dead ending. It's like solving a maze, like that are on the backs of Happy Meals in the 1980s or whatever. It's like dead ending in a
Mhm.
maze is part of solving the maze. Like
Yes, yes,
you don't just
yes.
get the maze on the first try. That doesn't
Right,
mean you like the dead ends or should be
right.
enjoying the time you're wasting on them.
Wow, that's
You
a good
should
way to
want to
put
have
it.
less dead ends and and reduce them as much as is possible. So they're both
Yeah.
part of solving the maze and not part of solving the maze at the same time.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, exactly. I love that metaphor, Joseph. Yeah. That's a healthy thing in a maze solution, right? Well, that's what our lives are like.
Yeah.
Embrace the dead ends as the next progress
Yeah.
in the maze exploration.
But yeah,
So,
but just because you feel empowered doesn't mean this path you're going down is actually, yeah, what is the right thing for you. It could feel great. I was just watching one of my favorite TV shows is House MD because my protector
oh
is
yeah.
very much
Mm.
like the main character, I think, or was.
Does he have a cane
Yeah, the guy
too?
with the cane. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right.
And he was saying that because they deal with a lot of moral issues and a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah,
emotional
yeah.
motives, so
Mhm.
it's kind of cool. And he was saying at a certain point, he said he was trying to justify taking money from a rich guy whose one of his symptoms is generosity. And he says at a
Oh,
certain point, and you're going to want to probably steal this, he said, so a sexaholic wants to give me oral sex. That makes both of us feel good, right? That's a win-win, isn't it? Like, and I was like, that's his argument.
yeah,
Like, the
right,
sexaholic gets what they need, and I get what I need, right?
right.
And that's just like we always use heroin as the example. Heroin makes you
Yeah,
feel good too, but that's even
yeah.
better because it's a transaction. Yeah, the
Yes,
sexaholic is getting
exactly.
what they want, and
Right.
the receiver of the oral sex is getting what they want. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, it's a win-win on both sides for the protective self, we
Yes.
would say. We could agree with that in that context,
Yeah.
but not the authentic self. So,
Yeah. So before we
okay.
go down into the sainthood role, there's one more housekeeping item that maybe will function as a um, metaphysical entree into that. Is my friend Corey, who I spoke with earlier today, had a request, like requesting a song in like on old '80s radio. By
Oh,
request, a definition for dualism,
dualism.
and
Okay.
by the same
Uh,
token, pre-dualism. We're gonna have to define also, and unalism, and then
yeah.
the segue.
Okay, so we'll start with the most dense downline
Yeah.
version, dualism, and the simplest way to what a dualism is that which cannot be itself and something else at the same time.
Ah,
That is the most
nice.
grounded. I can't be you and be me at the same time. So there's a dualistic distinction ability between two living beings. But I'm not the same as a tree. A tree can't be me and a tree. So anything that can't be itself, a duality is something that can't be itself and something else in the same moment. So that's dualism.
Cool.
But the now we sort of accordion back upstream,
Mm-hmm.
and the real meaning of dualism really can't be appreciated. My ear keeps spitting out one of my
It was a great catch,
yeah,
though. That was
yeah,
epic.
I I'm doing that all the time. Sometimes I'll knock spices off the spice rack, and I'm reaching, it falls off, and I just catch it with the other hand. I don't even look. So it's dualism is a downline. Now here's somewhere it pains me to quote Ken Wilber, but I love these two words. Uh, there is a implicate level of consciousness distinction ability, and there's an explicit
Explicate.
wait, what did I do? Explicate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the implicate domain, these are Ken Wilber's implicate explicate. It does apply here. We can use it. I had to honor Ken in that. The implicate version of dualism is 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 non-dualism, actually the next level up, because in our picture of things, dualism is comes out of a generative, not an empty, essentially, but a generative space. And so the transaction here is unalism behind non-dualism coming through the generative emptiness capacity to express as
Potentiality,
dualism.
capacity. Uh-huh.
Exactly. So you've got essence, unality, form,
Ah.
preduality, which is non-duality, and then expression, which is duality.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have all three together, dualism ceases to be inhibitory, and it ceases to be a problem because you're feeling at any moment, okay, I have a soul I that is expressing as in a human I domain.
Oh,
You
now I'm
see,
getting why enheartment is essentially unalistic, because
yes,
that's what
yes,
connects the hoods. That's what goes everywhere. Is its
exactly.
essence. Mm-hmm.
And so that the unality has its own segmentation. There is unality at every step down level of consciousness, with this most upstream, the Christos, the Christa, who is the child of the original Yan Gog and Yan,
Young
Yang
God.
God
Uh-huh.
and Yin God. We're all children. All universes are a function, are children of the Christa. And so you've got multiple levels of source being that are all can be described as unalistic, all the way down to where in our dualistic world, where I can't be you and you can't be me, and we both can't be a cockroach, thank God. In that sense, you, for all you listeners, wherever you're living, you don't live in that city you're living in. You don't live in that country. You don't live in that culture. You don't live on this planet. You don't live in this universe. You live in God.
Mm.
Everyone lives in God. Everything else is downlying dualistic thought dualisms or experiential dualisms. I can't be in Macon, Georgia. I wouldn't want to be in Macon, Georgia anyway. But I can't be in Macon, Georgia at the same time I want to be in Sedona, Arizona. Even though, interestingly enough, those are both
Both
red
God.
states now. So
Both
yeah,
God
and
too.
they're God too, right? So when I used to wake up in the morning with this new revelation, was years ago. Every moment I'm walking in God. Every moment I live in God. Why can't I experience that? I get that, but why
Mm-hmm.
can't I experience it? And you could say, relative to how what beautiful the door this is, the whole idea of sainthood is to give you the lived experience of what I'm saying, not just the insight,
Of course,
not
yeah.
just the insight, right? And so that's what sainthood does. So there's your step down transformers of ultimacies, several ultimacy levels of unality, reaching all the way down to the dualisms, because dualisms live within the next sphere of capacity for dualism, and that lives inside all the unalism. So it's all God, guys, gals. It's all God, and you don't have to believe in it. You're
You
just
actually need to not
swimming in
believe
it.
in it if you want
Yes,
to experience it. Yeah.
yes. Well, like we just said, the
Except as
lie
believing
in
it in order
belief.
to test it out, but not believing
Yes,
it as a gripping of an idea in your head. Yeah.
exactly. And that's what happens with belief in this world anyway. The will gets a hold of it and won't let go of belief because it's reflected back to the religionists as faith. And who wants to urinate on the idea of faith, you know? Well, we wouldn't urinate on it, of course, but we would say it's really young soul stuff either way, because it's still not a true experience of the divinity of every moment
And
and now and now.
that's so hard too when, like, occasionally I work with people in the business coaching world where they're very much leaning on believing in themselves or believing this will work and hope. And it's really just tough to rain on that parade, because it usually just takes a couple of questions to reveal how the faith, hope, and belief is being used to not pay attention to some aspect of reality that needs addressing. I had
Yes.
one of the earliest clients from like 15 years ago was a woman who had a retail and manufacturing company that was hemorrhaging cash, and she didn't know what the profitability of her products were. And so I was like, yeah, maybe you should see like if these product lines are even profitable. And she said, well, when I look at financial statements, my eyes glaze over and I just can't even read them. So I'm
Mhm.
just going to hope that everything is going to work out all right.
Oh boy,
Yeah, that didn't go well.
I can imagine. And go ahead,
And wait, one
finish
more
completely.
thing. I found out a little bit later her father was a financial manager, like a professional finance person, and she talked with him every week, like, and like sort of too often. And so there was this whole thing about like she can't learn about money because that's his thing, and then she has to stay his daughter and he's the expert in money and she can't be because then she would grow up. It was a mess. Yeah.
So the glaze over isn't what she perceived it was. Oh, my mind just can't go there. I'm not that kind of I'm neuroatypical that way or whatever. When there's a whole emotional reason
Right.
that she can't, right?
Yeah.
So, wow. Well, you know what you remind me? Good. Are you
I
complete
tried to
there?
help them. They went out of business
Oh,
eventually. She just,
mhm.
by the time they got their head around their finances, they did find out the profitability of all their lines and they were largely unprofitable. And it was just
Yeah.
too late.
Well, it reminds me of the most. Uh, I just can't believe it. Sometimes Oprah's former, and I'm not sure how still current, Oprah's favorite sort of spiritual teaching of The Secret.
Oh
And
no,
this
the secret.
and the secret is if you will completely over, I'll put it in our terms, over attach to an intention and hold it no matter what, you will draw your dream to manifest for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's the metaphysics of the secret, right? And of course, we would say, how do you know that's a healthy thing for you to receive this lifetime?
Mm-hmm.
What you're intending. There's no question of the nature of your intention, what the hidden motive is behind it, the unconscious motive,
Yeah.
right? So there was a movie based on it, and it showed all of this perfectly, and it all worked out. Wow, magic. So
Mm-hmm.
again, here's a one size fits all paradigm. If you just over attach to an intention without analyzing whether it's helpful for you or not, just because it feels so doesn't mean it's really
Yeah.
true.
I got a quick story for you. Around 2000 to 2000 to 2002, I was really into landmark education. I was in my mid 20s, and it was really good for me at the time. It was perfect. I needed it. And there was a segment of a program where people were talking about intentions, goals, what they wanted to use the course to manifest, because that's what you do in landmark education, right? What are you going to make happen in the world? This one guy stands up, and his goal for the course was to manifest a three-way relationship.
Well, and if you went to the secret leaders, they would have supported that sine qua non,
Yeah, well, what was so interesting was this was a room of like at least 80, maybe 100 people. And people were talking about all of what they wanted to do, and it all was registering as fairly clean, good things, healthy, wholesome type things. And he's like, I want to manifest a three-way relationship. And you could feel the air go out of the room. There was this like heavy thud energetically where people were like, ugh, because it just didn't feel good at all. It could have been totally appropriate for the guy at the time, but it didn't
Yeah,
register that way to like anybody. And you could feel
yeah.
that the leader was like going around her own reaction and being like, okay, let's talk about
Uh,
that.
oh
But there
boy.
was like something intrinsically off about it that was at the feeling level. Everybody felt it. But the
Yeah,
paradigm says, well, you just go with that. Why wouldn't
yeah.
you?
Yeah, just never mind. We'll support whatever. Even though we all experienced this was off, they don't go
Yes.
into why do we feel we're off.
Right.
Reminds me I'm not sure I've ever mentioned it here, but when I used to do talks there was one talk I did on enlightenment, Zen enlightenment, and I think I've said the 18-year-old, raised his hand and he said, "Well, I think I'm enlightened."
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and I said, "Well, tell us, share the room." Well, I felt empty my whole life.
Oh
So the same principle here,
yeah.
mistaking emotional wound-based emptiness with the potential, the infinite potential of generative womb space of divinity. So the same principle here. At least I was able to say, well, we would not say that that makes you enlightened without a lot of investigative exploration.
And for a lot of meditators, that depressed emptiness
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
true no thingness of pre-duality
yeah,
are mixed up and woven together, which is
yeah,
really sad.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and you can't get at their depression because they're
Mm,
just like, what do you mean depressed? Everything is meaningless and empty. And then they'll have
yes.
like a giggle laugh about that when they're
Hmm.
not, emotionally flattened and visibly depressed about it. I've worked with people like that. It's very hard to undo or
Yeah,
disentangle.
yeah. I reminds me just recently, I saw a headline of an article from someone who was interpreting Zen enlightenment and said that true enlightenment is not nihilistic.
Hmm.
And so I read a little bit of it, and of course, I got a great amount of sorrow and a chuckle or two because anything that has intrinsic meaning is rendered impossible with an illusory self. So all an illusory self can do in such a case is attach to something for meaning, even if it's the meaning of meaninglessness. And he didn't go in
Attachment on
that deep.
attachment. Yeah.
Exactly. And so
Hmm.
it has to be nihilistic if there's no one home. You
Uh-huh.
see, and so they that first one by the first guru that you said was so easily mixed up with the I. Oh, it was
Aja, right?
Aja. Yeah, kept repeating the I without deconstructing the I that he meant. Talk about you can't get any further than that.
Yeah.
So in this sense, the you can't if our message here is it's not the thing, it's the over attachment or under attachment to the thing that where all the value added neuroses flow out of. It's not that there's no ego or not ego. It's what's your attachment to the ego, or do you attach to the non-attachment to the ego? You can't define anything in the terms of consciousness as a solid thing, only a flowing thing that has multiple information paths defining it, not just one. So all of this stuff becomes these simple one size fits all concepts are just so sorrowfully ridiculous for that the only younger souls get duped by. So
Hmm.
we all got to go through that though. So it doesn't mean we can't talk about it
Yeah.
in terms of growth. So
Yeah, it's ironic.
okay,
Dead ends are a part of the maze, but it's taboo to talk about the process of dead ending as if they're not
yeah,
part of the maze.
yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. So many data points that you can open 10 or 20 doors to each one we're talking about here. And that's exactly what this podcast does, isn't it? Yeah.
Hmm. So,
Okay.
what's our
So,
main meal, our sainthood entree for today?
well, for today, I want to play off what the existential statement, the healed existential statement of healing the terror of non-being is. I want
Great.
to work backward from that. The existential statement in Identity of the healed terror of non-being is I am love as a child of a God of love, therefore I am. I am love as a child of a God of love, therefore I am. That's the existential statement of a healed sainthood track in Identity. And that's an experiential one, not a concept.
Surely.
Experiencing the truth of that.
You mean it's not something you believe in and tell yourself 200 times a day in order to approximate some version of?
No, this is the end of all mantras. That the
Yes.
solution of the terrors of being, not being, and non-being are not mantras. They are the end of mantras
Mm.
altogether,
No
right?
maintenance required.
No maintenance. You can't fall out. A true enlightenment, when you really heal the terror of not being, let's say, in accessing the pre-dual aspect of divinity, which can't be defined with words, you never need to worry about falling out of enlightenment. If you only do it, if you have to constantly maintain, like Andrew Cohen used to say, I got to always watch to make sure I'm not going to fall out of enlightenment. I can always feel the pull to fall out, and you've got to watch it. Then, well, he never really enlightened relative to the emotive existential fear that we all carry, the terror of not being. So we don't, as we say so often, we don't transcend anything. We try to heal a deep soul terror that came at the birth of our souls, these three, which is another story, which you haven't got to fully yet. So that's what I wanted to start with, is that the end of mantras, the end of any attachments or maintenance, like you said, no maintenance required in that sense. So let's just expand the unality, duality thing that we just spoke to in a little more clear terms. Just because, how can I say this? Just because divine, well, let's say it this way. For divine being pre-exists our soul being.
Yeah.
And our soul being pre-exists our personality-based being, which is largely 2/3 to 1/3 governed by our protector I by default, right? So God is thus both senior to, let's say it this way, it's both senior to and is that out of which in any one life God exists, we secondarily exist in all moments. In other words, God is thus both senior to and is that out of which we secondarily exist in all moments. It's our own real root being. And so there's a way where we exist, God exists as our root being, but then there's a stem and a flower and a petal and a color of the petal and the odor of the petal. All are equally real, not one replaced by the more upstream context of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
See, and this is
holarchy versus hierarchy in one way, but it's even deeper than that.
in one way, but it's like a torus,
Yeah.
because you end up at the end of the most down line hooking right into the most upline. And so that's a three-dimensional Escher torus, five-dimensional, whatever you want to say. Mm-hmm. So this is a holoarchy, exactly, that all the elements are real, but some are more real than others. The most real is the essential, most upstream. The least real, relative to that, is the most downline version, us, the children, and our expressions. But that doesn't make our expressions, because that's the essence, not real.
Yeah,
and this
like,
is what
same way you could say the sun is an essence of a tree, because without the sun, the tree doesn't exist. But you can look at the tree and you're like, well, there's no sun part of it. You're like, it's all sun, because the sun is pre-existing every aspect of that thing.
Right, because photosynthesis allows that to be a downline expression of the sun and water. Also. So this is important. It may sound, oh, well, that's obvious, but that's not really how our world has taught us to
we
actually
don't experience reality that way. It's not about just thinking about it. It's about, like, do you experience that? And if not, why not? And do you want to?
Exactly. So in sainthood, then, the sainthood path is that it's both a quest to know the true nature of ourselves, right? At the same time, we learn the true nature of God. We're downline, step down, transformer, all real bandwidths, all in one holoarchal truth. No separation, it's seamless, and we have real being at every level. Now, the mind just goes, it blurts. It can't really take this in a hierarchical way. Well, the place, the room I live, the floor I live on is one level. But you're telling me that it's a good metaphor here, actually. The floor of the building I live on is just as real as the whole building, right? But you experience much more intimately your floor that you live on, but it doesn't render the whole building as more real than your floor. Mm-hmm. So in a holoarchy, they all connect non-hierarchically. That's all. But the levels are just as real. That's why it's so hard to get this holoarchy for the mind. The mind it can't really get it. So,
Hmm.
in that sense, so what I'd like to do here, maybe do what time? Yeah, we're good for time here. Uh, the, I think we're going to have to do at least a half of a third one here because we got other topics here this morning that came into, and that's fine with me to come. But what I'd like to do,
Hmm.
divine Edenity's sainthood does have prayers, and I would like to read one or two of them. And then we can just deconstruct for 10, 15 minutes before we get to our guru game, if that's okay. Does that
Yeah,
feel right?
sounds great.
Okay with you?
Yeah.
All right. So here's one I wrote back in the 80s that came to me, and I had to update it since 2012 because it's a yin being. But here's a take on the old Our Father Christian prayer that reflects much more the truth of Edenity. And I just wanted to start with that one because it's the clearest and simplest of them all. And you'll recognize the cadence here as from the Lord's Prayer in Christianity. O my provenance, the breath of all being, infinite is your eternal seamlessness. Your presence sustains, your moon now reigns in matter as it does in spirit. Help me remember I'm always worthy to receive you, and teach me to know the ways of my fear, that I no longer impart the ways of my fear unto others, and lead me out of my darkness and into the light of your love. For you are my sovereign teacher, my loving mother, the worlds within which my lifetimes unfold and my journeys end, forever and ever. Amen.
Mm.
So if you haven't heard that before, which we haven't done on the podcast, any prayers, there is prayer, but here's a good example how the both the context and the content of the prayer is in alignment with what we just talked about, the structure of divine being and we as children of it. And I'd like to read one more here that really relates to the metaphysics, the prayer of immaculation. O divine being, as the depths of the ocean are one with the shallows, so too is your presence one with my being. Please guide me in all the ways to heal my fears of being in the world, that the curtain between my fears and myself be drawn ever more open, that a deeper I may emerge in value and self-love, so I continue to grow mature heart emotion, that I may ever become a source of courage and inspiration to myself and others in the worlds of my life. There's personhood. Please guide me in all the ways to heal my fear of being not in the world, that the curtain between myself and my soul be drawn ever more open, that myself no longer fears its own death of being, so I move as one with the earth and all of its rhythms, that I may ever become a source of peace and serenity for myself and for others in the worlds of my life. That's sagehood. And finally, in sainthood. And please guide me in all the ways to heal my fears of being not of the world, that the curtain between my soul and your presence be drawn ever more open, that I re-encounter my bond with you, my provenance, so I never again know human life without you, that I may ever become a source of wisdom and love for myself and for others in the worlds of my life. So the context of sainthood here in this prayer is to be the final solution is to be in the world, not in the world, and not of the world. Personhood, sagehood, and sainthood. So each one of those paragraphs there in that prayer speaks to that I may ever become in personhood, that I may ever become a source of courage and inspiration. In sagehood, it's I'm ever become a source of peace and serenity. And in sainthood, it's may I ever become a source of wisdom and love. So
Mm-hmm.
here's the whole range of our soul, our humanized soul capacities that are based on healing the three terrors of being, not being, and non-being, to be in the world, not in the world, and not of the world. Not of the world means to be in it, but not over attached to smaller versions of our soul consciousness as the protector. So there's several prayers, and Bree has even written a few of them from her point of view that has much more non-predual to them than these. These have pretty much content. There's 4 or 5 more, and soon these will all be uploaded onto our website after we get through the next level of our
Cool.
organization.
Can you say more about the difference between being not in the world and not of the world? Can you disambiguate those? Because that can be tricky.
Oh, yeah, it can. Good. Thanks for asking. Sure. What we're talking about in not in the world is there's no I that you can actually feel as substantive, as a noun. That's being not in the world, because in the world, in a sagehood way, pre-sagehood way, is that your I is a noun. That's being in the world. Without an I, you're not in the world. So not in the world is a lack of a noun I. And not of the world is not attached. Your soul I, your I of your soul is not attached to the what look like permanent states and only experience everything as permanent stages. That's not of the world, is permanent stage unfoldment, no noun states, because the I itself is a verb, not a noun.
In not I, though, in sagehood, aren't there also no permanent states?
In one way of saying it, that's right. But the I that even the verb I is not an I that can attach. You see? So the verb I is rolling stone gathers no moss, right? That way. And so not in the world means the lack of a noun I, and not of the world means that lack of that presence of a verb I doesn't dead end in any moment. So they're really close. You're right to ask about that, but it's all about inhabiting your verb I as a soul center without it being a noun. Did that track?
And is there a will component too? Like, what happens to will? For me, it's increasingly difficult to tell the difference between the two, sagehood and sainthood.
Yes,
because they're like two different colors of water that have just merged in one pond.
Yes.
But
go ahead.
What about will? Like there's a merging of personal will and divine will in sainthood. Where is will in sagehood?
After enlightenment, what you call will becomes moot.
It's just what arises.
It's just what arises. Exactly. Will is taken out of your
personal
hand.
will co-arises with experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You react to experience, and that's not a center of will going, yes, oh, this is me right now, then this is me right now, and this is me.
That's so funny, because it's so confusing for me, because sometimes something is in front of me, like I'll get the mail, and then it's like, mail has arisen in front of me, and now I am that which is doing things with the mail. Like, and then there'll be this, my mind is like, are you sure you should be doing this right now? Like, you're just doing that because it's right in front of you. And then, and I quote, I'm like, well, yeah, it's right in front of me. I'm just, okay, I'll just do it. It won't take long. And then other times something is not in front of me and I'm just guided to do it. Yeah. And it's like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing now. And usually I don't notice until after I've already like moved. That's how I know it's not my mind deciding, because it's like, I'm putting on dirty clothes. It's like, oh, I guess I'm doing yard work now. I don't remember deciding that. And that's a sage influence versus saint.
Exactly. Experience has will, not you.
That's sagehood.
That's sagehood,
Yeah,
right? The
okay.
experience
Oh,
imparts its
I
own
wouldn't
will.
think of that as having will, but it sure seems to sometimes something's right in front of me and it's like, I gotta do this right now.
Well, if a guy comes up in the middle of the street and I don't like the way you look and punches me in the face, the will of my experience is going to fill the whole space.
Right.
And so it's subtle to talk about the differences, but it's important to note here we're in changeover from the old way of defining pre-dual enlightenment.
Right.
And so the merging when
The edges are not so clear anymore.
the edges are not so clear,
Yeah.
and because of that, the blur between sage and saint blurs even more.
Mm-hmm.
The post yin divine enlightenment is a combination of sagehood and sainthood that it wasn't prior to
Uh-huh.
2012.
Yeah. Okay,
So
well, that makes me
the
feel
lang
better because sometimes it feels awfully messy. And I feel responsible, like I should know what the hell is going on and
no,
know the difference.
no. Oh shit. We're all in a series of transition. My scorched earth Zen enlightenment, like we said last time, that's obsolete now. And so trying to adjudicate my experience of 60 some years of my life with post 2012 influences of yin divinity. There's no lanes anymore between
Uh-huh.
personhood, sagehood, and sainthood. So we're going to have Venn diagram overlaps where we're going to go, what the fuck is going on? I am I a person or am I experience or am I just one tiny cell on the pinky finger of divine being?
And
You
that's
know,
exactly what is accelerating the
yes,
enheartment, which is the
exactly,
integration of all three hoods, not the separate
right.
co-attainment of all three hoods.
No,
It
which
we
was the
apparently,
prior,
yeah, it was the
yeah,
prior idea, or at least how I held it. It's like, oh well, if
yeah,
you have an attainment in all three hoods, then
yeah,
you're enheartened. No,
yeah.
then that's just the
Not
beginning.
anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. It was with Yang
Uh
Divine.
huh.
That was the truth.
Uh
That's
huh.
Yangic kind of parallelization.
Yeah.
But Yin is all,
Yeah.
and so
Which
everything
seems
is
to,
in
yeah,
transition.
the downside of that is it's more confusing and more complex to get to, but it also seems to be the the pressure from the cosmic pressure to put them
Yes,
all together makes it
yes,
faster,
yeah,
because
exactly.
the disorientation makes you lose control faster.
It does. You can't summon up control.
No,
You
it's
just can't. So
you
if
drown in it.
it, So the bad news for traditional Eastern and Western spiritual path is that unbeknownst to me at the time, bringing this paradigm, even 1.0 version of Edenity, I didn't know that it was all going to be needing to be built before yin divinity took over. I had no, or defining
So
emotivity as
wild.
essence.
It makes
It's
so
so
much more sense now.
crazy.
How would you have built it during the crazy,
You-
confused mishmash mergy
mm,
thing?
mm.
It's like
This is what,
it's like you built all of the parts, like
yeah,
manufactured all the parts of the house
right.
so you could
But
put
they,
them together later in the
yes,
other phase. Like the parts had to be discreetly, carefully
yeah,
milled and machined, and now
e-
they're coming together with the help of divinity itself.
exactly. The metaphor can go even one more step, Joseph, and that is they had to be tested
That too.
as the house.
Yeah.
So not only all the components, but did they work with all the other components? And by even by the time 2012 came down, it had been tested for already 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
25 years for contradictions, and all the pieces did not dissonate with the final structure
Mm-hmm.
of Edenity's uh, attainments in all three hoods separately. So it was true then, but it's not as real
Yeah.
as the yin divinity is now, where everything's merging and we're all running around with like chickens with our heads cut off because we're trying to find what's the word? Not life preservers, but solid ground in ways that the yang god gave us the room to experience. But in the yin god situation, it's all water, and you have to
Yeah.
feel the therms, the thermic distinction of a flow inside the ocean as being a different temperature, but it's made of the same water. It's like when submarines bounce sonar, they bounce off thermal layers of the temperature of the water. They have to be really careful how to use sonar that way, because the transmissibility of sonar is based on the density, and the density is based on the temperature of the water.
I didn't realize that. So the sonic waves can refract through levels of different temperature.
Exactly. And that'll blur a picture on a sonar screen. So they got to know which, there's beautiful names for those layers. This is what it's like now. We don't have three separate pillars. We've got multiple thermal layers of one ocean that interact with each other and all the time. So the beautiful thing about the prior version, Joseph, though, is it gives us a framework to experience the new version of it. Yeah. And we can feel, oh, look how it's
a reference point.
Same. Yeah. There's a reference point. So without the reference point, this is why people are asking, why is everyone so confused? Why is everyone breaking up all of a sudden? There's so many. Somebody read an article this week on the news. Why is everyone breaking up? Yeah. The relationality isn't working anymore. Even at that level of what intimacy relationship is changing. Yeah. So Bree and I, on our own, has watched Yin Divinity keep rebooting and resetting what we define as intimate relationship ever more cleanly, without we hit one landmark. Ooh, wow, that's new.
Yeah, then it's like, we understand relationality now. And then 6 weeks later, it's like, we don't understand relationality anymore.
Sometimes 6 days later for us. And we have to constantly be comparing notes all the time. Is this, wait a minute, are we in transit, or is this a new resting place? Because there's no solid rest done now.
Yeah. It's just, and just broadly beyond just relationality, that's one thing I'm really learning. I noticed, like, the only time I suffer, and I had yesterday and the day before, I was tired from just running on God knows what, because it wasn't me. I was doing so much and yet didn't feel like I was doing anything at the same time. And then I kind of crashed, and I was exhausted and cranky, and talking to my mother had something to do with it, but it started before that, so I don't play victim to her. And I was texting with our friend and colleague Anya, actually, and she just read it out. She's like, is some part of you looking for form again? And I just felt into it for like 15 seconds, and then boom, was back in the flow. And it's like, yeah, I guess that's what was going on. Some part of me was wanting to drive with the emergency brake on. And because it was just terrifying. I mean, if I had 2 days earlier this week that felt like I had taken 5 tabs of acid both days, and it was fine for me. It was actually really exciting, but some part of me just was like, I can't go on like this. We got to stop. And then what's the consequence? Suffering. And it's like, okay, well, those are your choices: trip balls or suffer. Like, that's what life is giving me now. So okay, I'll keep tripping then.
But at least we're embracing the learning curve.
Yeah.
Pleasant or unpleasant. And that's a really good lesson for everyone to concretize it that way, is that you want to embrace every moment, whether it feels good or it doesn't feel, and bleed that sucker for every bit of meaningfulness. Yeah. Oh, that's what this is. And so the bottom line here, to close for this segment of it, is that we, unlike what religions do, and even New Age stuff that are led by gurus in some way, you can duplicate the complexity and the problems and the challenges of what Joseph and I talk about at the human level in these podcasts. You can duplicate this. This is not some nirvanic pie in the sky end game. It is a learning curve that you can duplicate with tried and true 30-year clinically tested personhood, sagehood, and sainthood dharma, where you too can have this experience of total befuddlement. But it'll be easier for you than it has been for us. It'll be easier for the next generation, because we've got a new God. The moon is ruling now, not the sun. And so we've got,
I think, 5 years.
Switch. 5 years.
I've been getting intuitions about 5 years. I think someone who's really committed and really hungry can get to enheartment in 5 years now.
That feels right to me, Joseph. I had been toying with 3 to 5, depending on what you brought in this
Hmm.
lifetime.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we're
yeah, so
definitely presupposing past life spirituality attainments, which is,
yes.
but who doesn't have that who's drawn to EB? It's almost always there.
No, no. If you're drawn to identity, you've had somewhere between 300 and 450 lifetimes. That's
Yeah.
just that you're the only. That's the niche market
Yeah.
that we inhabit here. That's our brand,
Yeah.
So, yeah, it presupposes that you've had sagehood and sainthood enlightenments, but no one has enlightened in personhood before. Nobody, never in the history. The identity is trying to have the first set of assumptions and dharma to heal the spiritual aspect of personhood. That's
Hmm.
never been done before. But
Yeah.
we do incorporate all, but and not a but and all the other spiritual states are obsolete, basically.
Yeah.
So if you've got a Swami you're sworn to and you still refer to them as His Holiness,
And have more
you're
than one picture or one or more pictures on display in your house,
yes,
maybe
or a
you're
little
abdicating
all,
your own self authority.
or if you're still wearing the Osho's mala,
Mm.
which a lot of people still are, despite all evidence to the contrary. Oh, we want to urge you to consider what we're saying here. Don't take it on any belief, but man, it's a different world, and we invite you to experience it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, time now to play yet another installment of Guess the Guru. How exciting.
Yes.
We've got a wonderfully poignant quote that is in Sainthood land today. And
Okay.
but before I read that, first of all, I want to encourage everyone to play at home. And speaking of playing at home, full props to Alan, who got the Yogananda one last time. So thanks, Alan, for playing at home. And so that means that Stace is not the undisputed champion.
That's right.
Based on the honor system, because he communicated to Stace that he knew it was Yogananda. And I so appreciate you for saying that, Alan, because I was judging myself for not having chosen a epitomized verse of Yogananda, but apparently it was good enough for someone who really knows Yogananda's work.
Yeah, yeah. And he said it took him less than a minute to realize it was Yogananda.
Nice.
And so, way to go, Alan guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that so supports and validates your choice there. He was never someone that I paid a lot of attention to, so he would not have come to mind to me. So
Yeah, and
that's
I'm
great.
just overjoyed that people are playing at home and interacting with us about that. So please continue
Yes.
to do that. We love to hear from you. Okay,
Yeah.
here we go.
All right.
The only true religion is between one heart and its maker. Anything we place between that connect will serve to inhibit that connect, not enliven it. Religion and its props, whether those props are in the traditional forms we've had for centuries or new ones New Age puts between you and maker, will allow you to knock on the door of maker relatedness, but will prevent you from actually going into its heart house and embracing it with all of your being.
Maker, this person uses the word maker.
Yeah. How about that?
I'm not sure I'm aware of any spiritual sainty teacher that used the word maker. I'm not as well informed as you, that's for sure. And you have a lot more nuance in a lot of these other teachers. I had to stick, I didn't look to teach other people's teaching till I got the rudiments of identity down on paper. So then I started comparing what I was coming with other teachers. So
Mm-hmm.
you went in another doorway. So I'm just trying to get here. Maker, I don't remember anyone using that term, but it's a sainthood teacher, obviously, and anything you put between you and divine being, then of course, is the impediment, and so that it robs you of the purity of access. So who would that be? In that way, I want this to be a woman teacher instead of a man teacher, but I don't feel like it is. Is it male? Can I get that piece at least? Is it a male teacher?
It is a male teacher.
Okay, and so it's not religious,
Quite
and
critical
so
of religion.
yeah. And so it has to be some sort of newer, now age leader or teacher, embodier. If those words
Hmm.
really imply an embodiment also of
Yep,
some kind.
definitely.
So this person has been authentically saintized in some bandwidths that are compelling. That's for sure, or else he couldn't say this thing. So who
Hmm.
do I know that has embodied what would be at least headline resonant with identity? Because everything
Hmm.
he just said, headlines, but not in its essential evolution, only in its result headline. Who would that be?
I
It's
can
got
give
to
you a
be
little
some.
more. You want to hear a little
Okay,
more?
yeah, yeah, and I'll tell you why I'm why I'm a little muddly after getting four in a row. But that's not an excuse. So go ahead. Yeah, give me a little more. I could use some help
Next
today.
paragraph. In terms of prayer, then, simple conversation will do. A humble heart seeking it will get no extra boost from talking with it in the Vatican instead of a vacant lot. To Maker, an alleyway full of rats and human excrement is just as holy as any temple on the mount, tabernacle, holy of holies, or ancient Peruvian ruin. In this
Oh,
conventional faith, you gonna buzz in?
you shithead! You're quoting me. That's me. Oh, you're so Joseph.
That's right. You win.
You clever guy.
That is from his book
That was
Enheartment.
that was the last thing I could have imagined, that you were picked me. And so, way to go, clever man.
Came to me yesterday and I just was laughing so hard about it. I couldn't wait. I was like,
Oh,
when should I do
oh
it? And then it was like,
God.
today's the day. So I just went into
But
the Sainthood chapter of Enheartment.
well, I had to earn this. I can really embrace here because it would have been the last thing I would have ever assumed. So I had to process my way to
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And so as soon as you started talking about an alleyway in Calcutta or
Yeah,
whatever it
yeah,
was,
that was very much you. It took
yeah,
me about 10, 15 minutes to find something that was not so obviously straight
yeah,
ahead identity
yeah,
paradigm as I needed to
right.
find something that was on the vague side. But the
Oh,
funny thing was how long it took me to find something on the vague side because that's not how you write. So I'm looking through it and be like,
yeah,
no, this is
right.
obvious, obvious, obvious. Oh, this could be someone else, maybe.
That for the first, till you gave me the second clue, I couldn't. It was vague enough where I couldn't even identify that. I haven't
Yeah.
written that sentence in that was 20 years ago. I
Yeah.
wrote that, or 15 years ago. So, thank you for the second helping me out there. But I would never have guessed you chose me. So thank you. That was great. Well, I reboot after last week's loss. Way to go, Alan. Yeah, you beat
Yeah.
me last weekend,
Well,
last time.
it just goes to show you the universalism of
Yeah.
reality.
Hmm.
Someone won last time. We
Hmm.
just didn't know
Yes.
who until Alan raised his
Yes.
hand. So
That's right.
that's cool. There's always a winner in unilism.
Uh, in unionism, there's always a winner. We just haven't discovered it yet,
That's
maybe till
right.
that moment. So,
Yeah,
oh, thank you for a really clever one, pal. That was great.
that was really fun.
Okay.
So
All
next time we're
right.
going to go further into sainthood. We also have nearly on deck. I have a list of frequently asked questions for EBE that came to
Okay.
me that I wanted to do at some point, but I just wanted to advertise that for future listeners. But you want to do more
All
on
right.
sainthood next time?
30 minutes max.
Okay.
And then I'd like to go into, because that was exactly another thing that I wanted to revisit. I forgot about a month ago. I wanted to go frequently asked questions. I know you compile them, so that's great. Let's do that, and then
Yeah,
we'll.
because I've started with some new people recently, and I found myself answering the same questions again and again, and some of them were really good. And I was like, why are we not doing an FAQ
Yeah,
as an episode?
yeah,
And any facilitator can give that to people and save a lot of time and
yeah.
all that.
Absolutely. Yeah. FAQs, like you say.
Yeah.
I love you. Yeah. Joseph sent me some examples of FAQs, and that's a really good modality as a teaching algorithm is
Mm-hmm.
FAQs. So
To
yeah,
get
let's do that. Let's just 30 minutes. I want to say a couple things about the last on the ground Dharma for sainthood, because like we said, the Dharmas for sainthood are personhood and sagehood.
Right. That's a nice way of saying it. Yeah.
Really, those are the dharmas. And then there are tweaks you can do in sainthood, assuming anyone who's been drawn to identity has past lives in both sagely and saintly awakenings, because 95% of them do, of all of you out there. If you're listening to this podcast and you haven't gone into the deep work, you're still likely to have.
Yeah, and which, I don't know if we mentioned this last time, but in both sage and saint, that can be an asset and a liability, because if you had past life where, like, for example, a crazy enlightenment, which is not uncommon at all, where people really lose functionality, or the same version of that in sainthood, where your individual personhood is washed away by the divine will, that can create in the protector system a resistance to that. Which can be processed in EBE. So it's still not sage or sainthood work in many ways.
No, that's right.
It's just about processing emotionally the wounding of that couldn't be done in the past, which is amazing to do.
Exactly. And there's just another example of it's all one highway, not 3 lanes, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why it's difficult to, after personhood and sagehood, to really talk about things in sainthood qua sainthood, you know, because you've already brought in your own people's own past lives in those two. And how do you integrate personhood and sagehood into sainthood becomes the sainthood dharma in itself.
I just got the image of, after all of that, it becomes a rainbow in a blender. That's the image I saw.
Oh, nice. Oh, nice.
So how do you sort out a rainbow in a blender? Depends on where you're standing, I guess, relative.
And Joseph, and that's why last point, I want to echo, having the framework that we had in the Yang time allows us to adjudicate the blurring that's happening now and identify at least as flows that interact. We couldn't even have understood them as flows that interact unless we had the framework to compare it to, right? So I didn't know I was making a paradigm for yin divinities entree.
Cool.
It's I've been reflecting on that recently. So
can't make this stuff
up. No, you can't. Okay.
Thanks, listeners. Tune in next time. I'll have another Guess the Guru for you. And if anybody got that it was Stace's writing before Stace did, then I definitely want to know that. So good.
Well, that's why I went maker. Wait, who used this?
I know. I thought about changing that word because that was kind of a clue, but it was the only clue you really had.
No. Wait, I've never read anyone that used the word maker, except the American Indians use the word maker.
And if you want to have some fun, because I'm really the only person who got to enjoy this, go back and listen to it again, because you'll get to hear things like Stace saying, I want this to be a woman. And I almost fell down laughing because you're talking about you. So it was really interesting how you were talking about you before you knew it was you.
I was talking about a yin being, and I've got more yin now in my field than I've ever had in my whole life. Yeah. So there is some correlation.
Yeah, sure. It was, anyway, cool.
Oh, what a funny thing. Okay.
Thanks for listening, y'all. And see you next time. Well, I won't hear you, but you know what I mean. Well wishes and exit thing and stuff. And you're terrific. We love you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Heart of Soul podcast. To learn more about Stace Barron and Edenity, please visit edenity.org. To learn more about Joseph Shapiro, visit clearandopen.com. Until next time, we wish you well on your journey.